Gabrielle, I'm so excited to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here with you, Shilpa, and I'm always so grateful for podcast hosts like yourself who offer us a platform to share our message. So thank you.
Yes, well, thank you for being here. And I was sharing with you just before we hit record that when I saw that you had this connection between corporate and then tying it to energy, I'm like, aha, she would be great for my energy awareness podcast month. And again, you were sharing the story before I hit record, maybe you can talk about you had met with some gals and we were talking about corporate life.
Oh, yeah. And that was just more of a reflection that it was end of last year. I'd already made the decision, but I had a lunch, girlfriends, four of us having lunch, catching up before the end of the year. And everyone had been in the corporate world. It was still in the corporate world. I was the only one who'd left it. And the conversation was really interesting for me to watch because those who were still stuck there didn't want to be there, but didn't know how to leave. And so it was just more of a reflection for me and a confirmation of what was a really good decision for me. And I don't want to dis corporate because I think, firstly, everything's got a golden and shadow side, as we know. And the golden side of corporate kept me there for 27 years. But, I just got to a stage in my life where, you hit a certain level, senior leadership roles, it's stressful. And it was at odds with the energetic state that I was trying to create for myself, which was more about flow, more about authenticity. And it's really difficult to be at ease, be in flow when you've got so much stress and responsibility in a corporate role. So that was more my story.
And it fits in so perfectly because the theme is crafting life's energy for flow. And sounds like you were very conscious of the fact that you were ready for that transition.
And I was conscious that I was in a resistant energetic state. Now, for me, because resistance shows up differently for everyone, for me, the resistance was constant anxiety, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Wait. It's like the most incredible thing because I've been facilitating. I'm a group facilitator. I've run more group process than I can remember. And before every single meeting that I led, before every single team session that I led, I always thought, is this the one that I'm going to kind of get tripped up on? Always waiting, such performance anxiety. So for me, the state of resistance was around a perpetual cycle of trepidation, anxiety, and at times terror.
And isn't until you've had pause and separation that sometimes
Correct.
you have a way to compare those two very polar experiences. And
Yes.
what's interesting spiritually is that we know that duality exists for a reason, that contradiction and allows you to then see the other side. I too was in corporate, as I was sharing with you, and it wasn't until I had left and not even being aware I'm leaving, and I'm feeling this because of these reasons where I'm at. I did the transition. I've been on my own away from it. And now I'm like, oh, that was resistance. That was anxiety. Those were triggers.
That's exactly right. And that's why a lot of people don't leave because they aren't aware of this invisible spiritual prison that they're living in, that they're trapped in. And we were talking before, we came on and about this invisible spiritual prison, which Rumi just, that Rumi quote, why do you stay in prison when the door is wide open? And of course, the prison is the prison of the mind and the fears and the stories we tell ourselves. And you're right, until you have an opposite experience of what the other side could look like, you actually just stay on that treadmill. And so what I've learned when it comes to changing your life, human transformation, is most of us continue on that treadmill until a crisis hits. And that was my journey. And my message to people is a crisis doesn't have to hit if you are tuning in to yourself and asking yourself really simple questions like, how am I feeling? Am I heavy or am I light? Am I open or am I closed? Am I resistant or am I, in flow? Those questions take a couple of minutes for us to just sit quietly with ourselves to answer, but we don't do that because we are on autopilot. And I have to say that I was on autopilot for so long. And, you talk about the duality. I didn't have the duality ever in my life because I've lived with anxiety since I was a young kid. And so that became my norm. I actually didn't know what it felt like to wake up without that gnawing sense in the pit of your stomach. And I listened to a podcast. A woman was talking about exactly that phenomenon. And it was that conversation that made me realize, you know what, there is a choice here. And I don't want to live in this constant treadmill of fear and trepidation and anxiety. So you're right, until you don't know what you don't know, that saying, and that keeps us stuck.
You're describing some qualities a moment ago on when you are in the state of flow, I would speak. And one of the ones that occurred to me as you were describing it, at least from my perspective, was when you're in a state of anxiety from a young age. I too was and was unaware, is that you're in contraction, but your physical being is giving you messages of contraction for a long time. And when it's been happening since the childhood, it's pretty painful because then by then you think everything is a fight or flight.
Absolutely. So I would have described my experience of contraction, and I love that word. I was at war with the world. You talk about fight or flight. My dominant frequency was someone who was at war with the world, fighting for her very existence in survival mode. And so that's how it showed up for me. And, for other people, it's different things. For other people, contraction can look like passivity. It's the inward anger. You direct your anger inwardly to yourself. So it's really simple. There's such a simple litmus test, which is really tuning into your energy so much easier than what you think it is. There's so many different ways that you can work out what's going on for you energetically. Like for me, what I started to notice when I became aware of energy was the language that I used, the words that I used. And I noticed I talked to myself, full disclosure. I woke up one morning and I heard myself. I'd had 8 hours of sleep and got out of bed and I heard myself saying, "I'm exhausted," out loud. Now that's interesting. And I noticed that I used the word exhausted. I'm exhausted. It's exhausting. They're exhausting. Different iterations of the word. And I realized that if you tune into your language, that gives you a clue as to what's going on inside you. The word exhausted was my way of describing the energy drain. That was my energy was just being sapped by constant worry and fear. So language, notice the words you use, because that can give you a really simple clue as to what's going on inside you.
It's so interesting how synergy and I would say synchronicity is the right word, works in life. I was literally having this conversation with another woman that's in this spiritual space, and she was talking about conscious communication, which reminded me of nonviolent communication, with the words we use, the energy that it holds. And I too, because maybe it's parallels to what you're describing from young age, whatever reason, what is going on in our physical environment or family,
Yeah.
I would often tell my mom, "I'm exhausted." And she, of course, didn't understand all of the more spiritual aspect. So she'd always be like, "Yeah, you're always exhausted." And
Wow.
it wasn't until the last 3, 4 years where I guess my mindfulness got tuned in to that energy world. And I thought, am I saying something that is really describing a bigger issue?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
And of course, Shilpa, when we saying, I don't know if it's the same for you, but for me, when I was saying I'm exhausted, what I was meaning is I'm burnt out, not physically exhausted. I'm psychically and psychologically exhausted. Yeah. So that the demands of the situation are greater than my ability to deal with them at the moment. That's why after an 8 hour sleep, I woke up feeling I can't face the day. That's what I'm exhausted meant. And it took a lot of um, diligent observation and mindfulness, I guess, to change my language. And when you change your language, you change your energetic state. I know that's been said to death, but there's so much power in that when you really internalize it.
And it is not to say, I think you would agree that we're denying what we're experiencing. However, believe that being aware and having the realization that this exhaustion is a reflection of perhaps, yes, it's manifesting as a burnout or overwhelm, but there are conditions outside of us that we're reacting to or
Yeah.
responding to.
Yeah.
And oh, here's an opportunity now that you realize that, saying, I would like to change the narrative.
Well, that's right. Now, but when you're in that narrative, there are two things. I mean, there are often times where you can't change the external stuff that's happening to you. Like I had the luxury of being able to resign from that job, but not everyone's got that luxury. So the other part of, then you've got to work on the other part of the equation, which is how do I increase my capacity to deal with the demands placed on me, which is where energy work comes in. And it's about really elevating and expanding your energetic capacity so that when things happen in life, which is inevitable, and when you're going through tough times, when you're going through troughs, when you're going through transformation and change, you're better able, you come off a higher base. That's for me was the purpose of getting into energy work. And that for me is the definition of resilience, because resilience is not about so much bouncing back from adversity, but it's when adversity strikes, you're not affected as much because you're coming from a higher base. And that's the objective of working energetically. Well,
Yes.
it was for me.
Yeah, and I agree. I feel the same way. It's almost, and I feel like maybe you'll get this, is like energetically, vibrationally, you allow yourself to, I would say, practice techniques that allow you to stay in that higher vibration. So when you're in a situation or conditions are surrounding you where you have to respond, you're, I would say, kind of like better equipped. Like if you're working out and you're constantly doing leg workouts, and if you have to run, maybe you've got the capacity, right?
Exactly. That's a great analogy. Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also enjoy the idea that this is not just about the mind. It's not, it's a holistic approach when we talk about resiliency. I'd like for you to kind of maybe share a little bit about
Yeah.
that, its
Yeah.
connection to energy.
You know, the mind and our thoughts and energy are actually one and the same things. So, because our thoughts are just an energetic frequency, and so are our feelings and our emotions. And that's the other way that you can, those are the other ways you can get in tune with your energetic state is by watching your thoughts and by tuning into your emotional landscape internally, because both of they're actually one and the same thing. Now, I've worked in the area of organizational psychology for 27 years. I worked solely with mindsets emotions, and behaviors, not energy, those three things. And you can affect great change when you are working at that level, but it's a bit slower because it's quite, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been in therapy for so many years. Great insight doesn't change your life because your energetic state is still the same. And so the trick is to work on the energy, on shifting the energetic component of all of those things. And we've already spoken about one way to do that, which is shifting language. Because when you shift your language, you shift your energetic state. That's because words have frequency, everything has frequency. So my belief and my experience has been that if you want to really affect change quickly, you got to deal with it at an energetic level. And that's the work that I do now, which is helping to release the energetic root of our blocks, not just, replacing thoughts, but actually getting to the root of that block. Where does it sit in your energetic body and sometimes in your physical body, and releasing that for good so that it doesn't continue to wreak havoc on your thoughts and behaviors and feelings. So yeah, I mean, that would be my view on your question.
And for someone who may not be as familiar with some of these concepts, I have two-part question. One is, you described you help people get to the root level on their energetic body. Perhaps for someone who may not be familiar with these terminologies, give us a very simple example. And then perhaps you can even tie it in with this notion that when we do not tune in with our somatic body or energetic body, that those locked energies then turn into dis-ease, real blocks. And I think that those two concepts can be esoteric to people who haven't really gone there.
Yeah, that's true. They're great questions, and thank you for asking them. So the first one, and what I want to say, thank you for, because I take a lot of this for granted now. So thank you for just reminding me that the language that I use isn't necessarily commonplace. So let's talk about energetic blocks. What are they? You asked for how do they manifest, like an example. So what happens in our lives? So I'll give you an easy to understand example, which is an event or something happened to us in childhood, or there was a series of events. By the way, I'm giving you an example about what happened in childhood, but blocks can form in utero, which is, when you're in your mum's womb. And if she had a traumatic event, that energy is passed to you. And they can also happen across generations. They can get passed down from generation to generation. So your grandmother suffered a trauma, gave it to your father, gave it to you. So the baggage gets passed down energetically. They can also happen, if you believe in this stuff, from that can be karmic, but I'm going to give an easy to understand example, which is childhood. So say you have a event that happens in childhood, and I can use myself, for example. All right. So my father passed away when I was 9 years old. He was sick from when I was 5 years old. So basically my whole childhood was living with a terminally ill parent, and one that was becoming more and more and more absent. And what happens when we go through those experiences, but they don't have to be that radical, but if we don't resolve them, and typically as children, we don't have the capacity to resolve these kinds of stuff because we don't have the cognitive capacity to work out and process what's going on for us. When unresolved issues are left unresolved, the energy doesn't go away because there's an energetic frequency around that event or that experience, and it doesn't go away, or it doesn't get transmuted because you're not dealing with it. So what happens is it lodges itself in your energetic body. And over time, if you don't address the issue, things compound because other similar things come into your life. They reinforce, that the beliefs and all the stories you tell yourself from that. And before you know it, you've got this invisible buildup of energy in your energetic body. And that's what we call an energetic block. It's low vibrational frequency around a particular issue that gets stuck because it hasn't been released. And just because it's invisible doesn't mean it's not driving the car. It's absolutely driving the car. So it's really important that we are able to release them. And I can't teach people really, I can give people tips here on a podcast around how you can move energy around, but to release an actual block requires very technical skills. And so I'd recommend you go to an energy worker to do that. So it requires the ability to read energy, and then there are techniques and tactics to release and transmute the energy. So that's what an energetic block is. And an example might be for, loss of a parent at a young age. I developed a block that was actually in my sacral chakra. It was kind of emotional free flow, just terror, fear, all of that taking over my life. And that was how it expressed for me. For other people who've lost parents at a young age, the block can come in so many different, almost limitless forms. I know somebody who developed a block in their throat chakra. They became their fear turned into an inability to express themselves for various reasons. And so you got to be able to work out where this sits and then release the root of it. So that's what a block is, an energetic block is, and that's the power of them.
I think that is interesting because while you and I have been in this space for long enough, not everyone can understand that. They'll be like, well, I'm just kind of paraphrasing. Someone might say, I don't express myself. Perhaps you and I might interpret it as what's going on with the chakra in that, or that energy in that chakra area.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
for those who may not be aware, maybe you can just give one insight before we wrap up on when energy gets blocked and it's not recognized. We often hear feelings or emotions are really first you recognize it once it's been locked in the body. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I think the best way to recognize that you've got a block, because most people don't tune into their energetic body, but most people can recognize patterns in their life. Yeah. And if you've got a deep energy block, you're going to be experiencing repetitive patterns, ways of thinking, feeling, perceiving, behaving, whatever it is. And your dominant energetic state becomes that. So I think we all know what our patterns are, or with a little bit of, thought and nudge, we can get there. And it's through the patterns that we understand where our blocks are.
Now, you've mentioned that there are a host of techniques one can apply, and that one cannot get into them on the podcast alone, but just being more cognizant or aware of our language is one of them. Are there maybe a couple of other techniques? Like, is it
Yes.
Reiki? I've heard of that. Maybe that's one of them. I'm just curious.
Well, I'm not going to talk. I'm going to give techniques to anyone can use, and kind of Reiki. I don't do Reiki. I do a different form of energy healing. You've got to be trained in that to do it. So I'd rather go into the simpler stuff that people can do. And I think one of the things that I do is I work very, very closely with my dreams, because dreams are the doorway into the unconscious. And we do a lot of work, a lot of healing, and a lot of work in our sleep. So one of the things that I teach people, and I certainly practice myself, is a way of getting into the right energetic state before sleep. So turn off technology, get into sit quietly, peacefully, tune in and set an intention. Can be tonight as I go to sleep, I set the intention to release my biggest block relating to whatever the issue is, and go to sleep, wake up, and the first thing you do is you document what you dreamt about. And if you can't remember what you dreamt about, which is quite common in the beginning, don't worry, keep doing it, because practice does make perfect. But tune into the energetic state you're in. Just document how you felt when you woke up. And the more you do this, the more you're able to tune into the intuitive voice within, which is our dream state. So that would be something we can all do. I love it because it's a highly efficient way of, managing your energy, healing, releasing, because we all sleep and we all dream, and we don't have to be doing anything other than taking 5 minutes afterwards to capture a dream, which I find really interesting. So that would be one tip I'd do. The other tip I'd give people, which is probably more of a temporary relief than it is a permanent relief, but if you're feeling a wave of anything, then go into nature. And what I do is there are different elemental energies that are out there. The sun, which is fire energy, does it for me. That's got the capacity to really transmute your energy quite quickly. So if I've got a day where I'm in back-to-back Zooms, between meetings, I'll step into my garden, sit on I've got like a deck thing there, sit there or stand there, consciously absorb the sun's rays, and literally within 3 minutes, I'm feeling elevated and my energetic state has shifted. You can do that with water. Some people, find that helps them. Other people find earth energy helps them. So go and, take your shoes off and just stand with your feet on the earth. There are different things that you can do in nature that give you temporary relief as well.
Absolutely. And the earth energy can also help you with grounding. And
very much.
Yeah. So the sun gives you melatonin. So it's just, we are energy.
We are energy.
So wrapping up, the theme was crafting life's energy for flow. What does the word flow mean to you?
Flow for me is authenticity, actually. I think when you get into an authentic state, then everything flows from there. And so in order to access flow, you've got to be doing the things that bring you joy. You've got to be, really maybe just ask this question: who am I when I'm at my best? And step into that state. I know that when I'm working with groups, when I'm in a coaching environment, I'm at my best. So when I'm feeling, off kilter, I will call in that energetic state and go there. That's, do the things that really, really bring you joy, bring you meaning, bring you purpose, and allow you, that meet your needs, that bring you fulfillment, because authenticity is the wellspring. Everything flows from there.
Beautifully expressed. Well, I really hope I can have you back again, because this was a beautiful...
I'd love to come back. I'd love to.
This was an incredible conversation. So thank you. I hope you have a lovely day in Sydney, and let's stay in touch.
Very much so. Thank you. You were a wonderful host. I appreciate that.
You're a wonderful guest. Thank you.